Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Upshift Podcast. The podcast that is, of course, all about Formula Racing. How's everyone doing? Today we are here to review and talk about the Sakir Grand Prix. And I would describe this Grand Prix in one word, which is pain. It's pain for a lot of people, but we'll get into that. This isn't a therapy session. This is the review of the Sakir Grand Prix. So, opening lap. We go racing in the opening lap, and everyone's fine, everyone's jolly, and all of a sudden we see a huge thing of gravel, and Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc are in the wall. I was confused because I didn't see much. I just saw a few things, and then all of a sudden they're in the gravel. I was like, oh, have they made contact? But it was actually Charles Leclerc's contact with Sergio Perez that triggered Max going onto the gravel and going into the wall. Personally, I don't think that was Charles Leclerc's fault. I don't. Sure, he locked up a little bit, but I think that Perez should have known that at least one person was going to be on the inside, either Max or Charles. And I think it was Perez's fault, personally. But yeah, they didn't give him a penalty. I don't think he deserved a penalty, even if it was his fault. I don't think he deserved a penalty for that. So yeah, opening lap, Charles and Max out. But we go on to the Grand Prix. And by the way, in the first corner, George Russell makes an amazing move down the inside of Valtteri Bottas and takes the lead. I wonder if he keeps that lead for the rest of the race. But going later in the race, we just saw George pull away from Valtteri. I didn't know that he was going to do. I thought it was kind of going to be the Mercedes were going to pull away, because I knew that immediately as Max went out. I was like, okay, this is going to be a Mercedes 1-2. But I thought the Mercedes were going to be like 1 second, within a second, getting DRS of P2, and I thought it was going to be a very close battle for the lead. But no, George Russell decided to take out a 5-second gap, I think, in lap like 20. And mind you, this is 80 laps, and this is I'm pretty sure the fastest time in qualifying was a 53.8, I think. Yeah, I think so. I think it was a 53.8. So this is... Oh, sorry about that. This is a pretty short circuit. And he pulled out a very, very big lead very quickly. And it was weird to see, because Valtteri has... I've talked to this with my dad. He's been in that car for 3 years. He's been in that car since 2017. George Russell, I'm pretty sure, drove 3 times before this. He drove in the Pirelli wet weather test, which wasn't actually, that doesn't really count, so it's actually 2. The Budapest young driver test, and the Yas Marina young driver test last year. And Valtteri's been in that car for 3 years, and yet George still beat him, and he was, 2 milliseconds off of pole? It's unbelievable to see that he has that much speed, and that definitely puts Valtteri under pressure for... I'm pretty sure that he's going to keep his seat for next year, but definitely for 2022. But yeah, and if Sergio Perez loses his seat and Lewis Hamilton decides to leave F1 and retire, Sergio Perez might be an option. George Russell, Sergio Perez, that might be a pretty good pairing for Mercedes. But going later into the race, we saw Alex Albon making a good few moves, making a pretty good move, I believe, around the outside of Lando Norris in turn 1. Good moves by him. I think today he had a decent recovery drive. He personally said he didn't like how he drove. It was very scrappy, and I do agree. It wasn't an amazing drive. I do think that he could have gotten a podium. If Red Bull did not pay... I said this. The entire point of Alex being on the hard tires was for him to go one stop and go for the end of the race. but they pitted him for some reason, and I'm pretty sure if they didn't pit him, he would be on the podium, because I think he was in P5. Yes, he was in P5. And then the Mercedes pit, I wonder if that went well. I'll talk about that later, don't worry. The Mercedes pit, so he would have been in P3, and I'm pretty sure Sainz pit. So he would have been in P2 if they hadn't pit him. So I'm not saying that Red Bull is to blame, but I am definitely saying that Red Bull is to blame for this. Because obviously Alex has to be blamed for his lack of pace, but I just really, really, really want Alex to succeed, but he's making it so hard for himself. He just needs to find confidence. But I don't know. Hopefully he shows good pace in Yas Marina next week. But moving on to the later stages of the race, we saw a little battle between, like I said, Lando and Alex, and also Perez. Lando got left in the dust by Alex, and he started to hold up Perez, but when Perez finally got past him, he just out. He started catching Alex at a rate of knot, and just breezed past him. And when he got in front of Alex, he never looked back. I'm pretty sure he pulled out a 3-second lead on Alex. So a good drive by Sergio Perez. But a very quiet one from a man who we will talk about later, Esteban Ocon. He had a pretty decent opening first few laps. Had it pretty quiet. I'm pretty sure he got into P7, P6, that range. But yeah, he had a pretty quiet race until the end, which we will again talk about. But moving on, we saw Jack Ocon having a pretty decently good amount of speed. I think that he showed that he is Formula One ready. Maybe? I think so. I think that he is Formula One ready, and being only, I think, less than a 10th off his teammate, or it's either less than a 10th or 10th off his Latifi. I definitely think that is a sign that Williams could look at Ocon if George or Latifi decide that they want out of the team. Definitely look at Ocon. I don't think that this year in Formula 2 has shown what he has, because last year he's shown what he really has and took like 5th place in the stand. Ooh, yikes! Microphone fell. He took 5th place in the standings, and that was a pretty good year for him. But yeah, I think that next year, I don't think that he should be at Campos next year. I think that he should move to a different team like UNI Virtuosi or Prema or ART or maybe even Carlin, because let's be honest, Yuki Tsunoda is going to be out of there in AlphaTauri, and also maybe even High Tech. High Tech is definitely an option because they've shown amazing pace with Nikita and Luca Giotto. So I think that he should just leave Campos and try for another team. But in the later stages of the race, he had a spin. He had a pretty bad spin, and he went into the wall, but he did not DNF. He just broke his front wing, and he carried on. And that caused a safety car. And that's when the major pain happened for every single F1 fan that has ever lived ever. Because we saw the most stupid pit stop I've ever seen. And it's not from who you think. It's not from Ferrari, which you all more than likely thought if you didn't watch the Grand Prix. It was by Mercedes. So what happened is they decided to double stack, which is a pretty risky idea due to them being in the same box at basically the same time. I think what they did in, I think it was China, where they boxed Lewis, they got his tires off, got his tires back on, he went out, waited a few seconds, then Valtteri came. I think that's a good double stack. I think that's fine, because you have a little bit of time. But then Valtteri was sitting there and was right behind George, and they double stacked, and that's when the mayhem happened. And then we saw a 30-second pit stop for Valtteri because they didn't find the tires for some reason, and then they put him on the tires, and then his brakes were on fire for a little bit, and then they took it back off, and then they put it back on, and then they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't put these on for some reason. So they just took his new tires off and then put the old tires back on. I genuinely don't know what happened there. It was a 30-second. That's one of the longest pit stops ever. And by the way, talking about long pit stops, I'll talk about actually a bit later. But it's the team that you guys think of. But I just don't know what happened there because they seemed so prepared, and yet they didn't. And apparently they sent George on old tires, and then he had to go back around, and then all of a sudden we see the radio for George Russell, and then the news comes saying, George, you have a right rear puncture. A man who has been dominating that race for the entirety of the race, since lap 1, since corner 1, since that dive in the first corner on Valtteri. He kept the lead for the entire race, but in the last, I'm pretty sure, 10 laps, he has a right rear puncture, and he's out. I'm pretty sure there's a curse around George where he will never win in in a few years, because somehow there's no way that is just coincidental, where he's running really high, running really well, because this happened in Imola, where he's running really well, and Mugello, actually. Every time, and Germany, where he's running in the points, and something weird happens, and then he loses everything. So I don't know. It's something that he's cursed. But yeah, and then he has a puncture. He goes in the box. He has to pit again, and he comes out 15th. And it's so sad to hear his radio message, and just him just being really, really angry. And it's just really sad to see, because we all know he could have won this race. He definitely could have won this race. And I think that it just stung so incredibly badly, because we all know this could have been his Mercedes debut, and he could have won, and this could have proved to Toto Wolff that he is the man of the future for Mercedes, and yet Mercedes screwed him up. It's just, it's really frustrating to see, because you really, really want him to win, and it was just cruelly denied to him. But yeah, moving on again to slow pit stops, we got. Yep, it's who you think of. It's Ferrari, for some reason, having a slow pit stop for Sebastian Vettel for no reason. How do they have... Because they did it in Imola, where they had a 15-second thing. They did it today on lap, I believe, around 20, where they just couldn't jam his thing on. That sounds weird. Where they couldn't get his tire on. And then they did it again today under the safety car. And then they couldn't get him out. And he had to wait like 10 seconds. I don't know. It's beginning to seem like they're doing this on purpose. Like they're somehow... Like they're getting revenge on him. Even though they took him out of his contract. But it's just weird to see that Ferrari just not getting anything right with him. And... I'm pretty sure he's happy to think that there's just one more week of him being in the SF slow. So yeah, it's weird to see. But moving on, to the dying laps, we see Perez just absolutely pull away from the entirety of the field, and he comes home to win the Grand Prix, from getting spun round in the first lap to winning the Grand Prix. Great job by Sergio Perez. P2 was Esteban Ocon taking his first ever podium in Formula 1, and Lance Stroll in P3, a double podium for Racing Point. Good job by them. But the driver of the day for most people was Sergio Perez. Well, George Russell was voted the driver of the day. But a lot of people said that Sergio is also the driver of the day. But I actually don't think. I think that it's actually Esteban Ocon. He had an amazing drive. He had a very quiet drive. He was very patient. He didn't make any outrageous moves throughout the entire race. He just stayed back, and when his chance was shown, he jumped on it and got his maiden podium. So congrats to Esteban Ocon. You got the Upshift Driver of the Day award. Doesn't mean very much, but it's still something. So yeah, moving on out of Formula 1 to Formula 2, and all you need to know is Mick Schumacher is our 2020 champion. Round of applause, please. You guys, yeah. Woo! It was a very interesting race because we thought Mick could have won it, but then he pit early, and it was a weird race. But Jehan Daruvula also takes his maiden win in Formula 2. I think that Mick is the driver of the entire year, because like we said in the first episode of the season, I believe, episode, I forgot the number, but the episode with Josh Ravel, where we said he was actually in the bottom of the standings through round 1 because his fire extinguisher decided that it would turn into a bomb, and it exploded all over his car, and he had to retire. And he was at the bottom of the standings after round 1, and he fought all the way back to win the F2 2020 championship. Great job by him. And Prema win the team championship. We obviously would know that because Schwartzman and Mick would be an awesome pairing. So yeah, he is now the Formula 2 champion, and he is F1 bound to Haas. And that is all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching / listening, if you're listening on audio only. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed. That does help. Every single subscription helps. We are very, very, very close to 100, the big 100 mark. So yeah, please subscribe if you aren't already. Please also like and share the video with friends and family. Make sure you wear your mask. Stay safe in quarantine, and goodbye.